All right, we're gonna call something out of order. Mr. Young.
All right, the defense calls Amber Kyzer.
Once you're seated, state your full name, spelling your last.
Yeah, I've worked for.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that, boy. I was moving it thinking it was from the relation.
Amber Kyzer, Kyzer.
Amber, who are you here for?
I'm here for my babies.
Did your kids love their dad?
Yes, they did.
Can you tell the jury a little bit about your and Tim's relationship and how it was?
In the beginning, Tim and I had a very strong relationship. I think we found a lot in common. I wasn't speaking to my family at the time, and I'm not sure if he was really speaking to his at the time when we first met. And we just kind of latched onto each other. Later on, any little thing would kind of spark an argument, and our relationship became volatile, not just on Tim's side, on mine as well. It got aggressive at times, violent. But we managed to stick through it because we had the children. Towards the end of our marriage, I think I was thinking in the best interest for my children, that it was not a good environment. It was not something that children need to be seeing. So we separated ourselves. Tim initially left me and turned my power off and stuff. And I found it really hard because I just had nothing to offer my children. I could not provide for them. I think as a mother, I was making the best choice that I could. I trusted my husband at the time because he gave me no reason not to with my children. He was a good father while we were married. He promised to take care of them. We co-parented pretty good towards the end. I think that's what took me back a little bit. I'm really sorry that everybody has to sit here for this. I don't think anybody saw this coming, and I know between myself and members of the Jones family themselves, I know if anybody had seen anything, that any one of us would have done something about it, so we wouldn't be in this position today.
Did you love him?
I did. And I'd be lying if I sat here and said that everything in our marriage is bad. Tim and I had a lot of good times. It just becomes a point when things are volatile that you just make a choice. Where your young children aren't seeing certain things, it's affecting them at a point. And you make a choice to separate yourself from that person. And it's hard to separate yourself from that person because that's all you've known. All I knew from 19 was Tim.
Do you want Tim put to death?
I personally, myself, can't bring myself to want anybody to die. It's a really hard. I hear what my kids went through, and I'm just being honest. I hear what my kids went through and what they endured. Sorry. And as a mother, if I could personally rip his face off, I would. That's the mom in me. That's the mama bear in me, wanting to just make him feel everything they felt. I don't personally feel like I have the right to put anybody's life in my hands. I don't wish that upon anybody. I don't wish the Jones family to feel what I felt losing my sons. I do not wish to. I will never have my grandbabies. I will never have those things. They'll never get to see anything more of them. I'm trying to, I guess, take a step back and trying to put myself in everybody's shoes, because it has affected a lot more than just myself. It's even affected you guys. And you're just getting to know them. There's so much more about them. It's affected more than just me. I pray for Tim all the time. I pray for him often. I pray for his family often. I pray for my family. They didn't even have the opportunity to know them. I can't bring myself to want anybody to die. That's something that I say because I have to be okay with what I say on this stand. This is something I have to live with. There's been a lot of loss on both sides of our families. Since my kids have died, I have lost 11 family members, if you include my children, within the past 5 years. One being an aunt that died the first day trials started of kidney failure. I've had many, many losses in pregnancy. I had 8 babies altogether with Tim. 8. I had 5 healthy, 2 miscarriages, and a stillborn daughter, and now I have none of them. That's a lot of loss for a mother to feel. So I do sympathize with Miss Roberta. I do. I think her and I connected on that when I was involved in the Jones family.
Do you want mercy for Tim?
I do. And I don't say it lightly. He did not show my children mercy by any means. But my kids loved him. And if I'm speaking on behalf of my kids and not myself, that's what I would have to say. I'm not here for me. The mom in me just wants him to feel it. Everything that I feel, that my kids felt. Nothing justifies what you've done. There's nothing you could possibly say that would justify what you've done to my babies. But they loved you. I loved you. I thought if we could reach a point to make things work for our children that we could. And then we'd argue again. And I'd say, there's the Tim that I can't be with. It wasn't a game. It was a legitimate back and forth, a fight emotionally. I hope for mercy for you. I pray for you often. And I say that without excusing what he's done. I say that wholeheartedly from the depths of my soul. I don't want anyone to feel anymore. There's been so much loss. A lot of loss.
Thank you. Please answer your questions today.
possible way you could ever put it into words, is there?
No, ma'am.
You could sit here all day today and all day tomorrow and still not spill out all of the contents of your heart.
Yes, that's true.
Those 5 beautiful souls you had, they're irreplaceable.
They are. I have a 3-year-old that looks identical to Mira. Identical. But she's not Mira. No.
And you haven't been able to be in the courtroom, but you've been watching all of this, haven't you, so that you could keep up.
I have. I've watched every bit of this unfold.
And all of those unique, special, undeniable characteristics that you heard about the kids,
Yes.
those are all true and more, aren't they?
Oh, yes, and so much more about them. I think Ton made his presence known when Woody started talking.
You said a little while ago that the decisions you made were because I had nothing to offer my children. And that might be true financially, but you had a lot more to offer them, didn't you? Love.
I did. I didn't have the physical means, but they were very loved. This is something I tell my kids every night. I do. I told them, I talked to them on the phone, and I mean it. My kids were wanted. They are loved, and they are important. They are loved. They are wanted, and they are important. Always. I've always wanted them. I've always loved them. I've never told them that I didn't want them.
And so when we talk about that love and care that you had to offer them, that's eternal.
Yes, it is.
Even when you physically left the residence, he knew you still loved and cared for your children, didn't he?
He did. He did know.
And he knew that on August 28th of 2014, didn't he?
He did.
I want to talk with you a little about what led you here today to testify in this phase. Of course, you testified in the guilt phase because you had direct knowledge of what happened on the night of August 28th.
Yes, ma'am.
You were the last person to speak with an attorney.
Yes.
But what led you here today is I think you got a subpoena.
Yeah, to be here. It was from yesterday. I was called to be here.
And you were called by Tim's attorneys to be here, really to state what you've always felt, that you don't want to be the one to decide what should happen to someone.
Right. That's why we have the jury.
And part of what goes into that, just making sure that it's conveyed accurately, is in a case like this, it's a jury that decides the sentence.
It is.
Proper question. First question.
The state has never asked you or requested you to take a position on this, right?
No. No.
And
I need the Jones family to know that at the end, this is not my choice. This is not my choice. And I respect whatever choice you make. I need you guys to know that.
And so really, Amber, that's what I want to ask about a little bit more. With the state seeking the death penalty, the state has never asked you to take a position one way or another, correct?
No, they haven't.
You respect the state's right to seek the death penalty in this
Objection.
case.
Improper question.
Stand the first one on the record, this one all over.
Yes. You respect the state's right to seek the death penalty in this case.
I do. I just can't.
You don't want to be the one who would have to make that decision.
Right, I can't make that decision.
And we've never asked that of you, have we?
No.
And I think you said a few moments ago that as a mother, your feelings might be different when you think in terms of being a mom.
I think any mother would. I think any mother would want to shred the face off of anybody who would harm her children, absolutely. Yes, that would be the mom in me.
And the mom in you, part of you, will always be part of you.
Mm-hmm.
The mom in you has had a lot of conflicted feelings about what should happen to him.
Yes, I spoke very openly about that. I didn't get the chance just to kind of give a little, I didn't have the chance to hear everything that had happened to my children, what had literally happened to them, or what happened that night, the things that had led up to this, I wasn't aware of fully. So I was finding out, along with you guys and the world, what had happened to my children. So in retrospect, the mom in me was like, fry him. Absolutely. But from the beginning, I have maintained that I'm not a death penalty. I'm a strong believer in no death penalty. But yes, I've had very conflicting opinions with that in regards to what had happened to my children. Yes, naturally.
You spoke a little bit a few moments ago about some of the violence. There was an incident here in Lexington County, I believe, that you actually reported to the police.
Would it be the 18-wheeler?
Can you tell us about that?
Tim and I were leaving Walmart, and we had gotten into an argument, and he said, hey, let's just play chicken then, in a more stern, argumentative tone. And I said, Tim, it's not funny. It's not effing funny. It's not effing funny. We had the kids in the back seat. So an 18-wheeler was coming this way, and Tim steered the car where the 18-wheeler would hit me directly. And as we were driving toward the 18-wheeler, it wasn't much of a distance at all, and Tim jerked the car that way and just started laughing about it like it was funny. And I know he remembers that one. I did report that. It scared me. My children were in the car. Had that 18-wheeler hit, it would have killed. It would have killed everybody in the car.
Is that the only incident that happened during the marriage?
No.
Were there
Tim,
times you laid hands on you physically?
yes,
And you have since informed law enforcement about those times as well, correct?
I did. One incident in particular, we were arguing, I can't remember what it was about, but Tim grabbed me by the side of my head and headbutted me to the point where I just blanked out. And when I got up, it was just kind of what just happened. But I could feel my head kind of jar, my brain jar in my skull. And shortly after that, he threw a phone at my face and broke my back teeth out.
How much of that did the children witness?
I'd like to say none of it. My daughter, my oldest two, probably witnessed the most. Mira witnessed a lot of Tim spitting in my face. I was always a whore, spitting in my face. I'm not talking I'm talking like hawking loogies and spitting them in my face. He would take me by the side of my hair and smack my head as hard as he could off the car window, or while I was pregnant and we would be arguing in the car, he would stomp the brake to where the belt would just tighten around my stomach. The verbal abuse was always that he would chop me up and feed me to the pigs. Because pigs will eat everything on me but my teeth, and I'll never be found.
So what you've just described, did that contribute to you leaving the marriage?
It did. You know, I think when you're in a situation, when you're in a marriage, and it was volatile both ways. I'm not going to sit here and lie and sugarcoat and pretend that I'm this innocent woman. When you're in a relationship and it's like a tornado and a hurricane, and it's like a head-on collision, there's no coming down from that. There just isn't. It escalated more when we got here, and I think losing the Jones, like we would go to the Jones family's residence, his dad's residence, every Saturday, I believe, to have family dinners. That was my break out of my home. And I would vent to my mother-in-law or just have a moment and cry, because that's all I could do. When we got down here and we didn't have that support to just run to, I don't think either of us really knew what to do. I think I couldn't get my kids out to go to a park if I wanted to. I was stuck in a home for 9 years all the time until we went to his dad's house. And I've got to say, as a woman speaking honestly, I mean, it'll drive you nuts. It'll just drive you nuts. It's like the homeschooling with Mira and Elias. I'm not a certified teacher, so if my kids weren't up to par with their grades, I'm not going to pretend to be.
Videos, you identified them originally, I believe, in the first phase of this trial, and they have since been offered into evidence and have been published to the jury. But what can you tell us, Amber, about those videos that we saw that were sent to your phone of Mira and Eli?
At the time that I received those, you know, it crushed my heart because these are my babies. And I had even had a discussion with Tim about those recordings after they were sent. I felt like he was using my kids to manipulate me to come back home. The thing was with my children is that my children were still young, and they didn't quite grasp what was going on or the volatileness between our marriage, as kids shouldn't. That shouldn't be something that's flashed out to a child. That's something that they should be sheltered from, period. It was getting to a point where I couldn't shelter them from that anymore. So him sending these, it was almost tormenting. It was like, your kids are crying for you and you still won't come back. Why are you making them sit down and record themselves crying like this? Because you're tormenting them too. And just stop. It was tit for tat, back and forth like that constantly, and it was very draining. I'm not gonna sugarcoat things to benefit anybody here. I'm just that's my feeling on the matter. I knew my kids. I knew at least Mira and Natan wanted to be with me. I didn't miss my visits with my children. I missed maybe 2 at the end, but I was very adamant about seeing my kids. And when I had the chance, I went to see my kids, because Lord knows I didn't get to see them often. The pictures that you guys saw with Tim holding Gabe, I took those. And it was the last time I saw my children alive, physically. I don't know how anybody else sees them, but to me, Tim was smiling, Gabriel was smiling. All the kids were smiling. There was nothing. I thought we were at a point where we were co-parenting just fine. We were meeting, we were communicating. We had our volatile phone conversations regularly. It wasn't every night, but it was regularly. On both ends. I was stressed because I was managing at Walmart. He made the schedule, and it's like, Tim, I can't get there at this specific time. Can you please schedule it for another time? Or instead of meeting me in Lexington, he'd want me to find a way to get all the way to Bush River Road, but didn't want my now mother-in-law to drive me there knowing I didn't have a license. It was impossible. Nothing.
Did you feel like he was working with you to make those visits happen?
At times he did. At times he did. I'm not gonna lie. And I think his dad and his grandmother reiterated this too, though. When you make Tim mad, you make him mad. There's no working with him. There's no in the middle. It's either this or nothing at all. So it was rare that he would work with me on something. I believe he did work with me on letting me take them to Chuck E. Cheese and treat them to that. That was special to me because that's something I really wanted to do. I paid for every visit.
So the videos that you received, your word earlier was manipulate. You believe you received those to manipulate you into coming back home?
That's how I took it, yes. That's how I took it.
When we talk about the character of the defendant, the character of Timothy Jones, is manipulation a fair way to describe him?
Yeah, it can be. Tim knows how to manipulate. Tim knows how to be stubborn and hard-headed, manipulative, coercive.
About Natan,
I think a lot of what my kids may have said was coerced. I really do, because that's not the relationship I had with my children. When my children were with me, there wasn't a problem. There was no problem. My kids, mommy, and ran to me with open arms. I can tell you my kids were as stubborn as me, and if they had an issue with me, they wouldn't have ran to me.
I believe there's a Defense Exhibit 267, Defense Exhibit 267, a statement from Crystal Valentine, wherein it's alleged that the defendant would tell the children that you didn't love them. Were you aware of that behavior?
I was not aware of that. I was not. It's like when I say I'm finding stuff out along with you guys, I truly am. I was not aware that my kids felt like I didn't love them. I was not, because I showed it often. Anytime, I believe as a parent, when you are wrong for something, if you expect your child to not lie and to tell you the truth and to make things right, I believe as a parent you should do the same. And that has always been my thing with my children. That's why the notes were written to them. I wasn't the only failure in the marriage, but if I hurt my children, and I did, then I need to apologize for it. I need to address it. So, no, I was not aware of them hearing that. I always let them know you are loved, you are wanted, and you are important. And I express that to them often. My fondest last memory of my son Natan was him running to me across. Tim had just parked in the parking space at Chick-fil-A. And my son got out of the car, and he had a little checkered shirt, which I still have to this day. I can't bring myself to wash because it still smells like him. But he had his arms open, and he just took off in the parking lot saying, "Mommy." And I said, "Whoa, son, you're going to get hit by a car." The tight hug that my son gave me, I try to hold on to that, because if they died thinking that I didn't want them or love them, it's going to kill me. That's just...
Were you aware of any issues that Timothy Jones had regarding Natan?
The two children, out of all five of my children, the two that I always defended the most, that I found myself having to defend the most, were Mira and Natan. Natan primarily. Natan did not have a problem expressing his feelings. He was very bold. If you did something, he would very much let you know to your face. You could have a zit, and he'd let you know that it was ugly and to pop it. That's how upfront he was about his feelings. I think there was some resentment there with Tim. I think there was resentment with my daughter, Mira, and my son, Natan, wanting to be with me. I truly do. I think every parent, when you're in a situation where your kids are separated and you're you're vying for their attention and their love, you're pick me. In that situation, I guess I didn't fight hard enough. I didn't feel like putting my kids through this tug of war was gonna make it any better. I had my feelings and my opinions with their dad, and I felt like when they got older, they'd figure it out for themselves. Tim had other methods of it.
And that night, one of the sources of conflict that last night was that you had defended Latan.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. And he let me know it. Tim let me know it.
Amber, his statements to you, you call him making statements that you would never have the children, that they would never live with you?
He had many times, numerous times.
He's made that statement on more than one occasion.
Yes, I would say, Tim, what have I done as a parent? I mean, the court didn't find anything wrong with me as a parent. I had joint custody. I chose, as a mother, what I thought was the most responsible thing with making him primary custodial parent. I obtained a car. I obtained a license. I got a management job, and I got my high school diploma, all to prove to the system that I was a good enough parent. It just wasn't good enough for Tim, and it never was going to be good enough for Tim. I didn't have anything to offer. He was very insistent on them not being around Sean,
Sean being,
and then I found out about Crystal.
Sean being your husband.
Mm-hmm.
Your husband now.
Yes, and he was 24, by the way. He was 24 when we got together. I was 27.
When you said you found out about Crystal, you had not been aware.
No, I was not aware of that. I was not even aware. Currently, I live about 5 minutes from Tim's old place, and I was not aware that he had that place set up and had Crystal living there at all. It was not until the guardian ad litem stepped into the case. We were both equally paying for her, I believe, for her services, and I said, well, who's watching my kids? You know, I'm a mom. I want to know who's watching my children, because this isn't right. You know, if I'm not working, why can't he just drop them with me? I'd be willing to meet him and go there, whatever the case is, because they're familiar with me. It gives me a little extra time with them. That wasn't going to happen. That was a problem. Well, that's when I found out about Crystal and her being involved with, we still weren't divorced, so my husband. And it hit me the wrong way. Here, I'm being accused of sleeping with a 17-year-old boy, and it's him that's doing it. You know, I didn't jump into a relationship with Sean like everybody's proclaiming. That's not how it happened at all. And it's unfair for that to be put out there. Everything, I feel like everything I was accused of is quite opposite.
So the statement,
To make me look like the bad parent.
the statements that you would never have the children, Amber, he's told you that on more than one occasion?
Yes, ma'am, he did.
Nothing further.
Despite everything that you've been through, do you want Tim to be put to death?
Asked and answered, Your Honor.
Well,
No.
Thank you.
I'll respect whatever the jury decides.
And Amber, just to follow up on that, you're okay, but you're not the one making that decision, aren't you?
I am.
Nothing further. Your Honor. Your Honor, this time it can be excused.
she meant, we,
All right. You guys, we call the formal witness, and you're checking that everything's clear. And bring Ms. Britt back, Gray back. Couple minutes. All right.
But after he left the church, he got involved with substances again, primarily with alcohol and with marijuana. And what he found was that it came with a peer group, which was something that was kind of a first for him. If he was around other kids who were smoking or who were drinking, they didn't seem to notice or care that he was different, that he didn't have a mother, or that he was socially quite awkward. It gave him a built-in group of friends, something that he hadn't had before. So he got involved, drinking fairly heavily, smoking a fair amount of marijuana. It did not affect his grades until the point where one day he was at school when he was a junior and he had some marijuana in a cigarette case. The cigarette case fell by the wayside. It was found. It had marijuana in it. It had marijuana that he had taken from his father in it, unbeknownst to his father. And he was arrested there at school and walked out in handcuffs.
And is there, at that point in his school career, for the first time, I think, he starts to not do as well? Is that right?
It was after that by a bit. This was the end of his junior year. And he was fined and sent to treatment, which he completed for 5 months. And then over the course of the next year, for the first time really in his life, he failed a class and he got 2 or 3 Ds, which has never happened before and it's never happened since.
It was during that time that he also applied for the enlistment process.
He did. He enlisted in the Navy the middle of his senior year.
And does your social history indicate whether or not he disclosed his drug use when he enlisted?
Yes, he had a discussion with the recruitment people that he had a conviction for marijuana, and there's evidence in the record that they had a conference on that and they decided to give him a waiver because at that point he had completed treatment and he was no longer using substances.
And the jury's heard about him going into the Navy and the reasons for coming out. And just briefly, anything that you found particularly relevant about that for purposes of the social history?
A couple of things. One was that this also corresponded with the end of a relationship that he had in high school. And when that relationship was ended by the female, he experienced that as a real loss. Also, he had a dream of being a Navy SEAL, and that was going to be a source of positive identity for him. And so when he lost that, that was another loss. And the doctors there who diagnosed him with depressive disorder, NOS, not otherwise specified, and alcohol and marijuana dependence also said that he had started off and on since 14 feeling depressed at least half of the time. Over the past 4 years, it had been greater, and he felt like he didn't belong with others, all of which relates to what I talked about earlier in terms of looking for records that sort of back up what people tell me. Tim had told me that he first started having problems when he was a young adolescent with his thinking and with feelings of depression, and here's a record that documents him telling someone that when he was 18 years old.
After he washes out of the Navy, the home that he comes back to is the one that we've already had this up here, but this is the home of Tim Sr. and Carolyn and the issues that existed in that home. And is this the home that he comes home to after his?
Yes, it was.
And that is in, I believe, 2001. Is that correct?
I think it was in the summer of 2000 that he came out of the Navy.
Okay. What's his life like after the failure of his failure in trying to get into the Navy?
He came home to live with his dad and Carolyn, who were having a tough time at that point. Tim Sr. was still drinking a fair amount. And what Tim Sr. said was that Tim didn't seem like himself. He was kind of talking out of his head. And he had begun to use drugs and alcohol again. He was smoking marijuana. He tried a variety of drugs, including heroin and cocaine. he started not getting along with his family, and so he would sleep sometimes out in the woods and come into the house at night to get food. And then he started having problems with getting arrested.
And did his interactions with Tim Sr. change in terms of how he approached that relationship?
His interactions with Tim Sr. had changed back in high school sometime, maybe around his junior year. Instead of being on the flight side of fight or flight, he became more confrontive with his dad. He became more unpleasant with his dad. He would say things to his dad like, "Go ahead, Dad, why don't you just have another drink?" Instead of trying to be conciliatory and trying to get himself out of the room, he became more confrontive,
Now,
which did not make things any better.
the family then suffers another significant loss. Tell us about that.
They did. Tim had come out of the Navy, was living off and on at home, had been arrested for driving above the speed limit on a couple of occasions, and had been arrested for possession of a controlled substance. And it was after that arrest, a couple of months after that arrest, that his Uncle Larry died. Larry is 4 years older than Tim was, died in a motorcycle accident. It was very sudden, very unexpected, and absolutely devastated this family.
The jury's heard about the sort of lead up at that point to the things that he was arrested for and convicted of and sentenced to prison term in Illinois. And so I don't want to skip that period of time, but because the jury's heard about that, can you just tell us anything about that period of time that was particularly relevant for you to point out for the purposes of the social history?
Tim ended up being incarcerated for about a 16-month period for this. First, he was in the county jail, and then he went to a boot camp. And it was in the boot camp that he got involved with a pastor there and a religious movement, and he made a commitment to turn his life around. So boot camp for him was a place where he saw the need to make some serious changes in his life.
And is that commitment that he seems to have made in prison, does that seem to be how he lives his life when he first gets out?
Yes, it did. I should also mention while he was in prison that he was seen by mental health there and diagnosed with polysubstance abuse, rule-out personality disorder with narcissistic traits. So one more diagnosis for him. He came out of prison, and one of the first things that he did was to try to find a church that went along with the beliefs and the values of the church that he experienced while he was in prison.
And that church that he first found is the church with Pastor Sutton, who the jury heard.
That's correct. Centerpoint Apostolic Pentecostal Church.
Okay. And that he's, just want to make sure my dates are right. That's about 2003 when he gets out of prison. Is that right?
He was about 21 years old when that happened. He came out and was completing another substance abuse program as a part of his parole, which he completed, and by the end of it, about a year after he had come out, his substance abuse counselor gave him an excellent prognosis. He was attending church, and by then he was married.
And so it was at that church or during that period of time when he meets Amber.
It was, and I should mention about the church there. I talked to Pastor Sutton in his home several months ago, and there were three things that he said that I thought were significant for the social history. One was that Tim's passion and his faith were real, and that his desire to live his life by the scripture was real, in his opinion.
He's already testified on all these things. And it's hearsay.
It is hearsay, Bethany testified. So, rephrase your question so we can continue on.
Okay.
Rephrase your question, how about that?
Yes, sir.
She can get the point, but what's something special about her?
Yes,
Somehow
sir.
rephrase it.
Yes, sir. You talked to Pastor Sutton and you talked to other people about that period of time in Amber's life.
I did.
And I think that you've gotten consistent information from people But despite his devotion and attempts at being a good Christian at this point in his life, does the social history show that he's struggling with it at this point in some ways as well?
Yes, it does. And there are a couple of areas where that's the case. One is that people observed, including Pastor Sutton, that Tim took the Bible absolutely literally, and he took it as a guidebook for how he should be living his life. His grandmother said to him at some point, "Son, this is just a guideline for you." And he said, "No, it's the literal truth. It's what I need to be doing." And then he started telling other people in the family what they needed to be doing according to his beliefs. He told his grandmother that his little niece, who was 3 years old, had been demon-possessed. He could see it in her eyes, and his grandmother needed to get her out of there or out of his presence. He told another family member, more than one family member, that if they didn't go to a church like his and speak in tongues, that they would go to hell. His beliefs were very strong, and sometimes he would jump up and, according to various family members, start speaking in tongues in the living room, which they all thought was very strange. He took one of his brothers with him to his church at some point, and the brother said that Tim jumped up and was running around the church speaking in tongues, and he didn't understand that, and it was kind of embarrassing to him. So his beliefs were outside of what his family was familiar with, and it also seemed to be something that they saw him as heavily invested in and imposing on them at times.
At this point, Tim is, at this point of the social history, Tim is sort of on the cusp of beginning his own family. Has met and married Amber, and if we look back at this point in terms of who Tim is and what is Tim bringing into a marriage, and what is Tim bringing into his soon-to-be fatherhood based on your social history?
There are a number of things that happen to individuals that are raised with a lot of chaos, with a lot of substance abuse, with a lot of trauma. And in the individuals that I used to treat, these were the things that I would commonly see. They had problems with attachment, problems with relationships and with boundaries, difficulty with lack of trust, with social isolation, not being able to make good friends, perceiving and having difficulty understanding and perceiving other people's emotional states, empathy, difficulty identifying and expressing emotions of their own, problems with low self-esteem and shame and feelings of not belonging. So given what he had been through, that was part of the baggage that Tim would bring into any relationship. But that's also compounded by, if you think about what we talked about earlier, that there was a total lack of role models there for a healthy relationship. There was a total lack of role models there for healthy parenting or for protecting children. He took what he now had in the Bible and he used that to tell him how to parent, and he used that to tell him how to have a relationship.
And shortly after the marriage of Tim and Amber, Mira is born in Pennsylvania, is that
A couple of years later, yes.
And then they move from Pennsylvania to where?
By this time, I believe that Tim's grandmother and father and soon-to-be new stepmother had moved to Mississippi. And so when he and Amber left Pennsylvania with Mira, they moved to Mississippi to be near his family.
And Tim is continuing his education at that point.
He had started with a community college where he took a total of about 80 hours and got a 4.0 in all of his hours. And he was working towards being able to get himself into Mississippi State.
And what, he eventually succeeds in doing that.
He did.
What year was that approximately?
By 2008, he was at Mississippi State. He was 26 years old at that point.
Okay. And I jumped ahead a little bit, but Mira and Eli are born. Eli's born in Mississippi, is that correct?
Eli was born 11 months after Mira in 2007.
Okay. And I want to talk about the Cynthia reemerges very, very briefly, and if you could just tell the jury about how she comes back momentarily, and then after that we want to talk about what you found out about where she has been since Tim was 3. Is that okay?
Tim had continued to think about, worry about his mother not having a mother. It was a topic of conversation in this family on many occasions. Where is she? Why don't I know how she's doing? I think it was Roberta who took it on herself to find Cynthia. And she arranged for Cynthia to come to Mississippi and to visit. And so for the first time at about age 25, Tim met his mother.
And this was in Mississippi?
Was in Mississippi. And all of his family that was present at the time met his mother. I thought his brother Tyler had his reaction to that, which was that Cynthia was crazy as a ball bat. She was talking to herself, no soul, just blank eyes, that it was like hugging a ghost when he ran around her. Tim saw his mother, and others did too, fighting with her dead mother in the backyard. It was not a positive experience for him. I think it scared him. He looked at that and thought, is this my future?
Now, based on the social history in your investigation, what can we tell the jury that is most important from your perspective regarding where Cynthia has been and what's happened to her since, I guess, what is it, 1984 is when she disappeared?
She left the family in 1984, and we don't have any records to indicate really where she was from 1984 until she resurfaced in Syracuse, New York in 2008. In 1988, 4 years after she had disappeared.
Yeah, I meant 2008, meaning when she comes to Mississippi, right?
Yes, that was 2007.
2007. So when she arrives in Syracuse, what do people know about her and the people that she interacts with when she arrives?
She arrived in Syracuse, and she couldn't tell people who she was, where she had come from. She said that her name was Eve Jones, not Cynthia Jones. Was very confused, appeared to have amnesia, and what they later described as a fugue state, which is a kind of amnesia state that someone goes into oftentimes when they have dissociative personality, which is one of the things she was subsequently diagnosed with. That began in 1988, a psychiatric history that has continued to this day, that's encompassed many, many hospitalizations and an inability to ever live independently for any sustained period of time.
There's one record in particular from a place that she was treated in New York that I know that you included in your social history, and I think it's something that you wanted to show the jury specifically, and it's part of the records. And I would just ask for permission to publish it if I may overhead. Well, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. We got questions? Anybody got questions?